Our next presentation is New Best Practices for Future-Ready Hybrid and Multi-Cloud Network Strategies. Our speaker today is Paul Terrell. Paul oversees North American sales operations for Men&Mice. Please help me welcome Paul.
Thank you. All right, so new best practices. What we're really focusing on today is core services, core network services for hybrid and multi-cloud network strategies. About us, Men&Mice has been around since around 1990. So we're kind of the old men in the DNS, DHCP, and IP address management space. Really ideally suited for diverse networks and those networks that are looking for a multi-cloud and hybrid strategy. It would be multi-platform for core services. As she mentioned, that's a terrible picture. As she mentioned, I'm Paul Terrell. I've been in this space for 13 years in the wild and woolly world of DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. Really, my focus has been on helping enterprises really leverage their core service infrastructure, taking advantage of the infrastructure investments that they've already made, and really making them future ready and keeping up with network innovation and network change. What we're going to cover today, really different scenarios for different scenarios for hybrid deployments. And we're talking about deploying virtual appliances in the cloud versus using the native cloud services. There are a lot of pitfalls to be watched out for when you're doing any type of migration strategy, be it core services or really any migration. Some of the key ones to avoid, though, are of course loss of control. Things like, are you going to have root access still if you do a migration? Some compatibility hurdles between DNS and DHCP, and between new and old platforms if you are doing a migration. Lost time and efficiencies. These projects, like any IT projects, can be a time suck. They can turn into a science project that drags on and on and on, and that's obviously something to be avoided. And then finally, loss of visibility, which has in itself inherent dangers. There are new best practices that have been published by people smarter than myself, like Gartner, Forrester Research. We talk about that. Unifying management and visibility with overlay solutions. All right, so overlay solutions are the new best practices in the industry, and we'll be talking about that. And finally, adding security and control, granular role-based access, and automating workflows. Automation is really one of the best ways to gain efficiencies and gain control and ensure adherence to business practices. So of course, we'll be looking at that. And finally, leveraging service-native features. On-prem and cloud, otherwise known as getting what you've paid for. Now, DevOps and network team, together again. Historically, the relationship between DevOps and network admins have not been necessarily the most convivial. So for the longest time, DevOps would have pet projects, and the network team would kind of have to push back on that, making sure that the network retained its integrity and security, which kind of gave the network team a not earned rep for being barriers to progress. There are new ways now, though, for the network team to engage with DevOps and with executive shareholders. Rip and replace or steady progress. In the past, every time DevOps had a pet project, it sometimes took a forklift rip of a big chunk of the network to have this new shiny project go through. Now, the network team has the ability to be the voice of reason, help grow the network to support these highly visible, and that's kind of key, highly visible projects for DevOps. That enables them to be more visible to executive stakeholders and also be more of a strategic partner. This leveraging existing infrastructure investments while still supporting really innovative network projects is how the network admin team and the network services team can really show the value and proactively prepare for change. Integration with orchestration tools. Now, orchestration tools, and I'll keep talking about DevOps because DevOps, frankly, has a lot more leverage now than they have in the past compared to network team. And orchestration tools are basically crack to DevOps teams. They enable the spooling up and spooling down of servers and whole network segments for these innovative network projects. And it's critical that the network team is able to support this orchestration. But enterprise DDI, DNS, DHCP, IP provisioning, the core network services, must evolve or die. Has to be able to support these orchestration tools. So you need to have a tool in place. Right? So for example, like our overlay solution actually provides a layer of separation between network admin and these orchestration tools. So DevOps can use the orchestration tools, but they will not need access to touch, see, interfere with, or really even necessarily see how the sausage is made as far as when it comes to the core services. Workflows and reporting intelligence. Now this is another key thing now for the network team. The network team has always owned, of course, the network. But reporting intelligence is critical now for adding value for executive stakeholders in support of these projects. Since you own the network, you can see where the potential bottlenecks are, where the strengths and weaknesses of what is going to be a barrier to progress or what is going to accelerate the innovation. The network team needs to seize on and prove this visibility, because that's really what adds value. Now, migration. What's going where, when, and why? All right, what's getting migrated? If it's core network infrastructure services, these are pretty critical. This is not something to be done lightly or to be done just because a CIO sat next to somebody on a plane and heard about a new shiny platform. So you have to take a very deliberate look at where you're going. Do the new servers and solutions have the same capabilities? Because really, what's the point of a migration if you're losing something? All right? Just because somebody likes it doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense. Also, if you've currently got automation, good for you, you don't want to lose it. All right? It's really kind of hard to see what the downstream effects of a migration might be. It's hard to see what may happen to that automation that team relies on that needs this API that, by the way, is going to go away with this migration. So really what I'm saying is you need to do an audit. You have to do an audit. You have to say, I know where I am. I know where we're all going. Let's take a breath and see what the distance between here and there looks like and map it out carefully, because you want to know what you're gaining and you don't want to lose anything. Architectural differences, that seems obvious, but DHCP servers and DNS servers need to integrate. The two have so many interdependencies. A lot of these interdependencies are complicated when it comes to cloud integrations, especially if you're talking multi-cloud, especially if you're talking hybrid and multi-cloud. Multiple core services on-prem, and then different cloud accounts. These interdependencies can get very squirrely, and you need to map that out very carefully. Real world example, one of my largest logistics customers actually went with our solution because they were looking at doing a migration of tens of thousands of DHCP scopes from one DHCP platform to another. And they went with our solution because they're actually able to migrate all the scopes at once and not lose, the access, the scope configuration, the leases, and all these key things. So just have a solution that does support these. Having a tool in place for that is critical. Also, ensuring access to the corporate network if an internet connection goes down. So, since we're at Cisco Live, I want to use the example of something that a DHCP admin might face when looking at a migration. All right, so let's say they're moving from one DHCP platform, or at least part of their DHCP network, from one platform to Cisco iOS. All right, so why Cisco iOS? It has native advantages. All right, so DHCP on a Cisco router, it provides the gateway, of course, to the corporate network, but also, best practices say that DHCP services should be as close to the client as possible. I mean, you can't get much closer than a router, right? And also, again, autonomy. Having the iOS on the router, if the network melts down, if you lose internet connectivity, at least you will have network functionality to a degree when you have the iOS on the router. That gives you site autonomy. So if you've got a manufacturing site, if you've got a remote office, you have something like that, at least you will still have some network functionality. All right, virtual appliances. God, they were the thing for a while. I mean, appliances really did, make sense for quite some time. And I get it. I mean, really, they're fire and forget. I mean, they just work, right? I mean, you don't want to touch them. You push this button, this happens. You pull this lever, this happens. I get it. I mean, hell, we even sell virtual appliances, right? But you can't stress enough, simply putting your gear on somebody else's computer doth not a cloud strategy make. Let's not forget the cloud is just somebody else's computer, right? So, once upon a time, virtual appliances did even make sense for the cloud. Because I'm sure you can all remember at the advent of the cloud, it was pretty primitive, right? Well, since cloud providers have started really adding a lot more robust services, it's kind of stopped making sense putting these appliances out there. As more and more enterprises start leveraging these cloud native services, really why have something as limited, as an appliance out there when it makes so much more sense to use, the resolvers in VPCs that are just native to it. Things like, Amazon Route 53, Azure DNS. You're paying for the cloud service anyway. It just makes more sense to use the native capabilities. Yeah. So speaking of limited, here's Mr. Legacy. Now, a lot of organizations have homegrown solutions. I mean, it's a common thing, but homegrown solutions, just by their nature of being pretty static generally, have their own litany of challenges. All right. First and foremost, is ownership, right? So back in the early aughts, when old Joe, the old PBX guy, cobbled together the Beast, which is his pet project. I mean, it solved the purpose at the time. It worked. Well, now Joe is retiring. Whose couch is the Beast going to sleep on now? Yours? I mean, who's going to be responsible for ownership of it? And also the functionality. I mean, resilience, change. I mean, nothing becomes more evident in the static nature of homegrown solutions than when updates and advancements come rippling through the network, stressing interdependencies all along the way. As everything around the Beast evolves in the network and it remains static, it just becomes more and more of a challenge, especially when you consider things like new innovations. The Beast isn't as nimble as he once was. When you have some new market innovation come out, it can be, a challenge. And also wholesale network transformation, things like IPv6. Homegrown solutions really have a hard time evolving with that. And also, it takes so much time. There's so much process re-engineering necessary if you're doing a wholesale network transformation and you've got something that's woven itself into the network fiber throughout so many years. If you want to change something, it can take a lot of time, and also, if it takes so much effort and so much political capital, it just becomes a matter that is easier not to. Once it gets to the point where the status quo becomes the biggest competitor to innovation. And mundane tasks. Nothing causes burnout faster than boredom, right? I mean, if you want to see turnover on your team, take a bunch of talented, intelligent engineers and assign them mundane tasks to do. That's a sure way to get turnover. All right, speaking of interdependencies, who doesn't love an API, right? I mean, APIs are great because that's really how you do a lot of automation, a lot of workflow. And again, with APIs comes those business controls, that are baked into automation. But they work best when they're well strategized. You have to plan these things out. And frankly, all APIs are not created equal. When they're used well, a judicious application helps free your team from the boring stuff, right? The mundane tasks. They enable smart people to focus on fun things that cause innovation and help grow the business. And they also shorten resolution time of service tickets, which, hey, is a great KPI, makes the department look good, but also makes the team look good and really improves the morale overall of the network services team, which is a good thing. So, one side note I wanted to add. There's an increasing relationship between artificial intelligence and APIs in a lot of enterprises, especially larger ones. They're really trying to leverage further automation. Artificial intelligence is not yet ready for prime time, however. And I included this as Keaton Patty. It's really kind of amusing, and I don't know if you can read the whole thing, but this guy forced a bot to watch over 1,000 hours of Olive Garden commercials and then asked it to write an Olive Garden commercial of its own, and it's I thought, pretty amusing. But it's just an indication. APIs are cool, APIs automate, AI ain't quite there yet. So, there are, of course, 3 common types of APIs. There's the SOAP API, the JSON RPC, and then REST. REST is the most commonly used because it's scalable, it's reliable, right? It's good performance. I mean, it's fast. Now, things to look out for, though, if you're looking to do automation with APIs, if you're looking to get a solution that has a lot of API functionality, is the API fast? Now, pretty much every service now has an API, right? But again, not all APIs are created equal. Is it fast, or do you have to do things like database, SQL database statements to use it? I mean, if you have to have a manual step involved with the API, what's the point? Also, can you define your own workflows? Point and click. Does the API include all the features and functionality of the UI, or does it kind of seem like an afterthought? Again, not to pitch my magic solution, but everything you could do through our UI, also you could do through the API. So all of the business rules, all of the user controls, all the audit trails, and all of that are in the UI are also in the API. All right, so overlay. Why overlays? Now, Gartner, recently came out and said that is the best practice, at least for the core services industry, for management, DNS, DHCP, and IPAM. Overlay solutions. Why? Well, just by their nature, they're quicker and more flexible. All right, they're more nimble. You can use leverage high availability, always on. These are obviously important things for keeping uptime. But really, one of the most important things with an overlay solution is when all hell breaks loose, an overlay is your friend. An overlay solution does not take control of the underlying core services infrastructure, on-prem or cloud, but it merely enables management of it. So if the overlay solution itself were to melt down, it's not going to take your core services and leave them in a smoking crater. I mean, it's not an overlay solution will not take down your network if it goes down. And you may remember a couple of years ago, there was a big US airline that actually had to ground its entire US-based fleet because its DDI grid melted down. An overlay solution would not leave you at the altar like that. A moment on my overlay solution, because we're just talking about the flexibility of them, the compatibility with it. So an overlay, the benefit of it is, it just sits there on your infrastructure and then communicates out with, and this is multi-cloud, hybrid. You've got multi-platforms for DHCP, multi-platforms for DNS, and multiple web, different web services. An overlay doesn't care what your underlying core services infrastructure is, it just enables management of it. So here's an interesting case study I decided to include. So if you want to talk about an organization that's used to kind of keeping up with shifting things like the changes to the Icelandic weather, the Icelandic Meteorological Office. So they're a customer of ours, and basically they leveraged an overlay, our overlay, but they leveraged the overlay solution to be able to not only get centralized management of disparate core services and disparate cloud accounts, but also enabled co-hosting. So multiple governmental bodies were able to leverage co-owned assets and co-management. So what? Well, that just makes sense. It's just efficient. Being able to leverage multiple assets by multiple agencies with differing levels of access, different workflows, different automation, but all leveraging one single solution makes sense. And it makes financial sense for a business, but also if it's a governmental organization, as in this case, it's just taxpayer dollars, or kroner in this case. But really, changes that used to take 30 minutes, now take 3 minutes. What could your team do with that 27 minutes? Speaking of weather, see what I did there, umbrella. So the same things that make organizations good, ideal umbrella customers also make them ideal overlay customers. It's these disparate network challenges that seeking unified control and management is what makes ideal overlay and umbrella. Now, for example, the ability to point dozens or hundreds of domain controllers to the umbrella servers with one click. That's pretty good. Also, the visibility on the top level of your entire DNS infrastructure, so you can identify servers that are misconfigured and reconfigure them. Again, multiple in one click. That just enables you to better leverage your umbrella infrastructure. They're just compatible, complementary technologies. Now, you're looking at this hybrid multi-cloud. Again, pitfalls to avoid while looking at these migrations. Avoid using solutions that negate innovation, all right, that say to solve this problem, you're going to have to throw more money at it. You're going to have to buy more boxes. That's not innovation, all right? That's throwing more money at the problem. Also, slow APIs. I already talked about that. Things that don't enable automation. Again, burnout. I'm sure there are plenty of people here that have had a job that just bored you to death, and it was horrible. Any tasks, any non-value add, mundane, recurring tasks that you can automate and get off your people's plate will, in the end, make everybody more happy and also improve the overall work product. And finally, avoid those organizations or those providers that isolate your network, all right? Those that keep you keep you trapped into an outdated business model where they say every 3 to 5 years, you have to rebuy your whole infrastructure. All right, you need to rebuy appliances every 3 to 5 years. Or, yeah, we don't really support the cloud that much, but buy some more boxes. Vendors that require you to keep buying their boxes, I mean, that's not innovation, that's extortion. All right, so kind of in summary, but again, the best practices are, it comes down to increased collaboration between DevOps, network, and executive teams. Remember that communication, all right, and cooperation equals the ability to plan. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to be able to actually have time to make things fireproof rather than be running around constantly putting out fires? Leveraging service native features, things that you're already paying for, which are superior in just about every way to existing on-prem functionality, should be leveraged if you have a hybrid cloud presence. Improving control, I mean, that's needless to say. Unified visibility, single pane of glass, single point of truth, whatever acronym you want to use. What it comes down to is you add value when you're able to show executive stakeholders, we can support innovation, we can support these initiatives. Ditch your homegrown solutions. Again, if it's not the business of your business to feed the beast, it's a gross misallocation of your time's resources, your team's resources to do so. And then be innovative. And a hybrid, multi-cloud networked organization is innovative. It doesn't have to be either or. You've got existing network investments that you've made. You can leverage them while simultaneously supporting a cloud initiative. All right, that's my presentation. If you do have any questions, I welcome you to visit us at booth 2234, where we have people a hell of a lot smarter than me that can answer them.
Thank you so much, Paul. We appreciate it.